so grateful for the session that we're about to do. I have to tell you that I'm so grateful. We're doing this session for a whole variety of reasons. Hi, everyone. Amy Pritchard, Game Horror. Most of y'all have seen me quite a bit this weekend. I'm really grateful that we're doing this session. There's a part of me that hates that we're doing this session. It's coming in and out. How's that? Better? Cool. Okay. I'm very excited and also a little annoyed that we even have to do this session, but I actually think this might be our most important session of our, and I say that having not gone into a lot of the others, so no. But one of the reasons we're doing this is a plenary, because I thought this was really important for everyone to be part of this session. We have an incredible group of panelists. I'm not going to give great detailed bios because I want them to introduce themselves. But we have some of the most unbelievable top leaders in our movement space, in our party work, in our nonpartisan work, in the ballot initiative work, doing voter protection, legal work, and security. So we have 4 panelists here. Emma Wilson-Sharkey from Elias Law Firm is going to talk about legal protection and some different things that you all should be aware of that are happening right now, things that you might want to be prepared for. Encourage all of you to take a lot of notes, and also think we're going to have plenty, well, I don't know if it's plenty of time, but we will have time for questions. And we're going to hold questions for the end. We're going to have more of a discussion. Many of you I've already seen Raina, who's our new DNC vice chair. Yay for voter protection and civic engagement. We'll talk about the party's perspective on this work as well. And then we have Maju and Jude from the Democracy Security Project, which is a new-ish, not totally new, a little more than a year now, right? Organization. I'll let them tell you a little bit more about it, but started to help many progressive organizations in the states around the country think about security in this moment. And again, I'm going to let them give their own background. We'll start with Emma. So thank you all for being here, and we'll, like I said, hold questions towards the end, okay?
Emma. All right. I think there's a deck. There we go. So my name is Emma Wilson-Sharkey. I'm a partner at Elias Law Group, and I'm here today to talk to you all about legal threats in the progressive landscape. So let's get into it. So first, what we're going to do is talk about what we're going to talk about. If you want to go to the next slide. We're going to talk about the trends in the landscape. First, defamation actions, then going on to the broad executive orders that we are seeing from the Trump presidency, then going on to talking about emboldened state actors, and then as a through line, the uncertainty that we're seeing in all of it. Then once we finish with that, we're going to talk about what these threats mean to you, and then after everyone is done, we'll do a Q&A. So with that, let's talk about the landscape. All right, so the first thing that we are seeing across the country is more defamation actions. Primarily, we are seeing these from public officials and from rich individuals who have money to spare that are willing to take these legal actions against organizations and individuals. And practically what that means, as compared to what we've seen in the past, is that folks are being more aggressive in these actions, and we're seeing that courts are letting them go on further. What that means for the folks who are getting sued is that these are more expensive, and so some may be more likely to settle. We saw that with ABC News, of course. I'm sure you all are aware of that. And then, Roy Moore, there's a Musk case out there, and then the Fox and Dominion. You can go to the next slide. We are also seeing broad executive orders out of the Trump presidency. This is no shock to anybody in this room, but this is a very planned tactic that they are using to cause chaos. These orders are related to transgender issues, to DEI issues, to funding, everything, and you could name it, and then we intend or we expect that these are going to continue to go on into the future. As we move forward with this, folks should be aware that not only do these apply to governmental agencies, some of them also apply to private organizations, including nonprofits. So some of the DEI rules actually apply to nonprofits. Also, of course, the funding freezes and then unfreezes all go back to who receives money from the federal government. So again, causing a lot of chaos, causing a lot of uncertainty. You go to the next slide. And then lastly, one of the final trend that we are seeing across the country are more emboldened state actors to align with President Trump. The first thing that we're seeing is that they are trying to enact more conservative policies across the board, especially on immigration. Texas, Arizona, Nevada, states across the country are really working to do this. We're also seeing that state actors are actually trying to stop progressive action where it is happening. So in a lot of states where there are a red trifecta, a conservative trifecta, ballot measures are actually the only way for progressive change to happen. And conservatives are trying to stop that ballot measure process in a number of ways, by making the signature counts harder, by making the circulation period shorter, basically making the entire process harder to use. Florida, Missouri, you name it, the Dakotas, Arkansas, Ohio, we're just seeing this across the country. And then lastly, what we saw last year and what we expect to continue to see this year are state agencies actually taking more aggressive actions as well. So actually in Florida last year, the State Department actually sent a letter to the TV station saying, if you run the reproductive freedom campaigns ads, we are going to take action against you. And we actually, on behalf of the campaign, sued the Department of State, the Health Department, and the court agreed with us that they agreed it was unconstitutional to do this. And so again, we are seeing across the board more aggressive conservative action, in basically every form of the government and every part of the election. Go to the next slide. So all of this to say, what we are seeing right now is uncertainty and a measure of chaos. And that really is the point. It's to make us feel overwhelmed, it's to make us feel like we can't do anything, and it's to make us feel like we should act out of fear. What I tell my clients and what I would recommend for you all is to really think about your real legal risk and how you can act based on that. Really what they're trying to do is to stop us from doing anything, and that really is the point. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about how you should handle, what you do next. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how this applies to you. Go ahead. So the first and obviously the most important thing is that you have First Amendment rights, right? So you have the right to speak. You have the right to peacefully assemble. We have the right to freedom of the press. But you just need to be thoughtful about this. And if you have questions, you should talk to an attorney. I'm not your attorney, I am an attorney, but you should talk to an attorney and make sure that you understand what your limits are and how you can really, say what you want to say in a meaningful way. And then we really want you to understand your landscape. What you say and how you say it is going to be different based on whether you're doing it in your personal capacity or in an organizational capacity, what type of organization, and really how you're doing it, what platform, the type of issue you're dealing with, all of those things. And so really it is about understanding your limits, understanding your risk tolerance, and then moving forward based on what you're comfortable with, based on also legal advice, of course. And just know people are taking actions. What we've seen this time as compared to the first time Trump was elected is that a lot of the actions right now are taking place in the courts. And we've seen more and more wins as we've moved along. The number of actions that have been stayed, the Trump actions that have been stayed, what we're seeing is this is moving forward, and we are stopping, conservative, terrible policies as we go along. We're also seeing groups now get more organized, like Indivisible, Move On, you name it. The progressive organizations are starting to move in a way that is really strategic and thoughtful. And so just know that that is happening, and there are ways to engage if that's what you want to do. As a last note, what I will say is 8 years ago, I was in a lot of your shoes, or was in your shoes as you are right now. I had just come off the Clinton campaign, Raina. I just come off the Clinton campaign. I was unemployed, really sad. And it took me a while, but I found a law firm where I was able to, and I've been here 8 years now, where I was able to, and are able to, make change through advising progressive candidates, advising progressive organizations and campaigns. And so just know, it's out there. You need to fight for it, but opportunities are there. So, yeah.
Hi again, it's me. I'm Raina Walters Morgan, and for those who might have missed in the last session, I'm an attorney, organizer, and I was the voter protection director at the DNC for almost 5 years. I had a very non-linear path in my legal career. I've done a little bit of everything. I've done big law, I've done government, I had my own practice, but I really found that I thrive in the intersection between law, policy, and politics. What we are seeing now, as Emma mentioned, is unprecedented. And there are very real threats to our democracy. And things are working. The process is working. But I think it's very important to be aware that the tactics that we are seeing are designed to undermine confidence in our election processes. They're designed to sow seeds of doubt. And we are seeing, I'm from North Carolina, in case I hadn't mentioned it, in North Carolina, we have a person who is, they are dealing with a challenger who is trying to throw out 60,000 validly cast ballots. What we are seeing are people trying to change the rules when the rules don't work for them, or when they lose, they're trying to change the rules to try and make it so that they can have a better outcome instead of just winning the election and winning on policy. Unfortunately, North Carolina and places like Arizona tend to be a testing ground for some of these more fringe theories. And we've got to make sure that, one, there is a legal strategy, but there is also an education strategy. There's also an organizing strategy that we have to make sure that we're working together on and collaborating on to the extent that we're able to do that. In North Carolina, if they are able to throw out these 60,000 been very encouraged about, and there is a legal fight happening. There are multiple legal fights happening around the North Carolina judicial race. But one of the things that I'm very encouraged about is that there's also an organizing piece. And so I think that that's really important for people to know in here. It is all us working together. So in North Carolina, what some of the organizers did was tagged the person who lost their race and who's trying to challenge these 60,000 validly cast ballots, tagged his social media accounts with testimonies of the people that he was trying to disenfranchise. They did so many that he deactivated his social media accounts. So it made, at least in that instance, it made a difference, but it's also bringing awareness to the fact that what they're trying to do is impacting real people. These are not just 60,000 votes in the sky. These are real people. These are people who followed the process, who are properly registered, and they're trying to throw them out on a technicality. So I think it's really important to just keep in mind that that's the strategy, and we do have ways to push back both in the legal field, but also in the organizing and advocacy field. And I think the other piece of that is making sure that people are aware of what is happening. When you go in to vote, you expect that as long as you are on the voter rolls, that your ballot's going to be cast. And if we are in a scenario where people are not aware that these types of challenges are happening, they're going to continue to do it. And we have to continue to hold people accountable. And that's where the other pieces of the education and the organizing and the advocacy come in. And then switching gears just a little bit, but very similar vein, in Georgia, the DNC recently filed an amicus brief because in Georgia, again, they're trying to create additional rules that would make voting, make the certification of elections more difficult by creating additional barriers and, creating ways that potentially delay certification. Sometimes people need to know that we are watching, and so that, again, is the organizing piece that has to go in tandem with the legal piece. Showing up at these boards of election meetings, sometimes people will take a different action if they know that people are watching the decisions that they're making. And one of the things that we definitely worked with our state party partners on when I was at the DNC was things like organizing people to go to election board meetings, making sure that people were reporting back the things that were happening at those meetings or discussions that were coming up on future agendas so that we can be aware of it, so that we can organize around it, and so that we can try and prevent some of these bad policies from coming into place. And it makes a difference. Sometimes it's slow, sometimes it takes a long time, but it does make a difference. And so I think my piece and my pitch for today is that, one, we've got to make sure that we're all working together. I know sometimes the legal piece seems very intimidating, and sometimes it's hard to understand or hard to follow, but know that for every legal fight, there is also another piece, other pieces that we can do in tandem to make sure that we are having the best possible outcomes.
Slide. Afternoon, everybody. Thank you. I know it's been probably a long day and we're winding down. On this theme of security and legal and kind of thinking about all the things that people don't always want to think about, we do want to talk a little bit about what it means to do this work in this time and the ways that we need to stay safe and be smart about the way we do it. My name is Maju Varghese. I'm a co-founder of an organization called the Democracy Security Project. This is my colleague Jude, who'll introduce herself in a minute. We started this organization not because we wanted to work in safety and security, but because the world told us it was time that we started to do it. It was born out of our own experience. I've been working in politics, advocacy, campaigns, and government now for about 25 years. I don't like to say that out loud. It makes me feel a certain kind of way, but anyway. And in doing that work, especially over the last 10 years or so, I've sat in seats where I've had a duty of care to people. I've been a COO, an executive director, and we have faced real-world safety and security threats. And I, as a leader, didn't always think I had the best answers for my team. I didn't always know where to turn. The solutions were out there, but they were all piecemeal. Sometimes I would find incredible security experts that I would put in front of my teams, and they wouldn't land because they didn't understand the work. They weren't culturally competent. They didn't come from the spaces that we came from. And so we decided to stop staring. Our co-founder, Jess O'Connell, and I decided to stop sort of staring at the problem and admiring it and to do something about it. 4 years ago, in 2020, which feels like 100 years ago, I was the COO of the Biden campaign, from the primaries right through the general. And I thought the hardest thing I would deal with was a pandemic. But when we came back into sort of more in-person activity closer to the general election, I had organizers calling every day, bomb threats, when they were just trying to distribute yard signs, a gun pulled on someone, putting a yard sign out in Florida on a highway. Every day. I mean, I remember a friend checking on me the last week of the election, and I said, I just want to get through this because I don't like where this is going. A few weeks later, I was the executive director of the president's inauguration. And January 6th happened 2 weeks before. And again, I thought the hardest thing I'm going to do is try to plan an inauguration with masks on and doing it outside and trying to keep people safe. But it turned into a whole other thing. And I had an entire staff asking me how we stay safe. And we piecemealed some solutions together based on years of experience and connections and contacts. But it was a lonely, hard place to be. And so that's one of the reasons why we stood this up, because we didn't want leaders in our space to feel lonely anymore. And we didn't want you, those of you, the boots on the ground, to feel like you didn't have a place to turn. Jess and I always say that we've got to make investments in people in this work, not just on ads on television and media buys and digital. We've got to make people feel like we care. We always preach management and training and development. Safety and security has to become part and parcel of the cost of doing business in the world we live in. That's just where we are. And so we're trying to deliver some solutions to people right now. We'll talk a little bit about that. We're going to walk you through some tips and tricks, too, that you can do today to make yourself a modicum safer as well. Turn it over.
Good afternoon, guys. I'm so glad to be here with all of you guys, and I echo everything Maju said. My name is Jude Hussein. I serve as the Pennsylvania Director for DSP, and I've been a community organizer for about 15 years in Pennsylvania and the region. So knocking on doors, organizing events, posting on social media like there's absolutely no tomorrow. I'm a government professional. I've served in the advocacy space for close to a decade, and so super glad to be here because security was never at the forefront when it came to organizing, right? It was always like on the back end because you came in a group, right? If you had your 3 or 4 or 5 people and we were doing a thing, it was okay because you had your people. But the more and more we work in this space, the more prevalent security has become, especially in a digital era.
So just really quickly, this is what we tried to do last year with 2 big things. Number 1 was the preventative training of safety and security awareness around physical, cybersecurity, legal. We took our lived experience in the work and we paired it with security experts that were values aligned, that we trusted, that we vetted, and we put the content together and we delivered. The other thing we did was help people one-on-one. We got calls all the time from candidates across the country. Almost 80% of them were women who were being harassed, knocking on doors, whose teams were being harassed as they canvassed, who've had threats at their field offices, organizational leaders ranging from candidates to leaders of nonprofits, a faith-based COO running an organization in Springfield, Ohio that served Haitian Americans and Haitian immigrants. As all that bubbled up with Trump and Vance talking about Springfield, Ohio, suddenly his face was on a flyer being sent around town, and he felt a threat to him and his family, and we leaned in to help. That's what we did last year. You can go to the next slide. And we're grateful to have reached, since last year now, we launched a year ago this week, right after Super Bowl Sunday. 58 trainings. We've trained over 1,800 people in 44 states. A lot of it's been virtual. A lot of it, sometimes it was 10 people at a time. Sometimes it was 150 people at a time. We just wanted to give people the tools to get out in the world and do the work and feel a little bit more confident doing it. You go to the next one. And then this is the team. It's security folks, organizers, leaders from all across the country. We're lucky to have Jude here from Pennsylvania, who obviously has seen and dealt with a lot in her state. You can go to the next one. So with that, this is our approach. Safety and security, the number one thing we learned, which we kind of felt coming in, but we lived it now, Everybody's approaching safety and security from a very different place. It depends on who you are, where you come from, your lived experiences. Have you been exposed to any of this before? Have you ever been under threat? Have you had a colleague or friend under threat? How many of you have ever been feel comfortable sharing? You can just raise a hand. You ever been the subject of an online troll or an attack online? Yeah. How many of you ever, in the course of your work, have ever been harassed, knocking on doors or on a field office or at an event? Yeah. Everybody comes at this differently. As we say, Jess says all the time, someone's safety threat is another person's Tuesday because they've been through it before. And in our country, unfortunately, women of color, the LGBTQ community has been through this for years, decades. They've lived it. But at the end of the day, we just didn't want to leave people alone and just kind of shrugging our shoulders at this. And so that's why we're doing this work. You can go to the next slide. All right, really quickly, I think Malcolm made the joke earlier about Doge being in his Social Security number. It's real. We help a lot of civil servants right now who are feeling under threat, people who work at some of the agencies you read about. We give them some tips and tools to try to get through this time. And some of them are these. You can go to the next slide. You should know where your documents are. You should make copies of them. I had a friend the other day who said he was traveling internationally and couldn't find his passport. Well, I told him it's time to find this stuff because we can't take the system for granted. We can't, you may not be able to turn it around as fast as you used to. Freeze and lock your credit, right? If you are concerned that your credit's been exposed, you can freeze it. We'll show you how in a second with some of the agencies. Download and make copies of things. Take out some cash. So we tell people all the time, you never know. Have some handy. I never have cash in my pocket. It might not be bad to have some in the house. And again, just planning for the worst, but also planning for systems that don't work or come down or come up. And we live in weird times. Can't hurt. Stock up on medical needs and medicine. Someone interesting is going to be the HHS secretary. Don't take any of that for granted. If you need a vaccine, maybe get one. If you rely on prescription drugs or your family or mom and dad or somebody does, make sure they've got the ability to get them, right? Don't take anything for granted. And the reason why we put this up isn't to alarm people, because this is what people come to us with. This is what people talk about. So we just wanted to put that out there. You know, the next one. And these are just some ways that you can track your data, freeze your credit. We don't put our thumb on the scale on any solution, but they exist. They're out there. Leverage them. Use them. Part of what we do with these trainings is not to scare people. It's to empower them. There are things that we can do to take our safety and security into our own hands. And there are some things that are out of our control, but some of this stuff is in our control. So we just wanted to make sure you understood that. All right? You go to the next one. Over to you, Jude.
Cool. Thank you. Cyber and data security. Next slide. So there's things that you can do. Raise your hand if you ever have opened an app and it said it needs like an update and you're like, okay, later. Okay, later. Okay, later. Anybody? Yeah, all the time, right? So please don't do that, because there's a reason why you need to update your software, right? Because it's not just to update cool emojis that Apple has, right? Or Samsung or whatever the case may be, but because it fixes those bugs and those gaps. So please, if you go on your software, if you go on your general settings, just open it up and see, hey, maybe my phone needs an update or this app needs an update. And so make sure you guys do that. Strong passwords. We can't keep rotating the same 4 different passwords. And so please try to come up with something creative, a random movie with a whole bunch of different letters. I don't care, 12 characters, an exclamation point, something completely different. 2-factor authentication. I mean, it just protects you, right? We just spoke about credit reports and leaking of financial data. Those things live on your phone. So we have to make sure we're doing everything we can to protect ourselves. And then don't plug in a random like USB, right? Have people email you the PDFs, the documents, the trainings, all of that good stuff. There is no need to go plugging in different kind of wires in your computer or in your phone or any tech gadget that you have. And your home Wi-Fi. Make sure we're updating those Wi-Fi passwords, right? Those networks, not what comes in the Comcast or Xfinity or those automated passwords that they have. Make sure that it's personal to you. You're the one that did it, but maybe not personal like your birthday or anything like that, right? And so something really, really unique. Next slide. So everyone has a phone or a tech gadget. Can you guys pull it out? And we're going to go to haveibeenpawned.com. And this is going to be really, really interesting. We've done it as a team, and it was very telling for me. And so we're going to do it together as a team today, too. Haveibeenpawned.com. There's no A. It's PWNED.com. And put in your email address. Any email address.
Any email address, a personal email, that old Yahoo account that might be sitting open, any of them.
And it'll show you if that email address has been leaked, if there was a breach of data. Has anyone been breached 1 time? 2 times? 4 times. 15? 27? 17? Anyone higher than 27? 38? 30. Anyone higher than 30?
Yeah.
No. Oh, very nice. See, it doesn't matter, right? We can all put ourselves in a situation that we don't want to be in, right? I had 16 and I was beyond myself in that moment, right? So if you don't use the email address, please delete it. There's no need to have 17 email addresses, right? And so these are things that are in our control that we can really, really tighten up. Next slide.
Just one other thing to add there. If you have an account that you use and like it's been part of some breach, and maybe that breach was at a retailer or somewhere you shop or somewhere else, just make sure you've updated the password on that account. If you don't have two-factor authentication, add it to that account. And any two-factor authentication is better than none. You know, so our cybersecurity folks tell us all the time, like even the text message one is better than nothing, right? Security keys are the best. They're these small keys. They're like the best in class, but anything is better than nothing. So don't panic on the 16 emails. If you have one that you don't touch ever, as Jude said, like time to delete it, deactivate it. No need to have it out there. But if it's one that's pretty active, just make sure you've updated the passwords. You've got two-factor. And just to double back on something Jude said, we all kind of cheat and use the same passwords a lot. But just think about it this way. The bad actors who would try to break in, if they crack one code, they crack many.
What if you make it too strong for yourself to get into?
Well, so you can also use a password manager, right? Where it'll create unique passwords for all of them, and then you only have to remember one to get you into the password manager. Well, it happened.
You might be out of luck.
Yeah.
You might be out of luck.
So just to say this, nothing we say or do up here or anybody tells you in this space is a silver bullet that's going to save you. We're just trying to put layers between you and something bad happening. It's kind of like when it's cold outside, you add layers. It's the same thing on this stuff as well.
Thank you. And so this goes into making sure that we're not oversharing in our apps, right? And so there's things like your contacts, location, photos, microphone, right? When we have the Uber app, of course, we share our location because the driver needs to figure out where we are, right? But should I be sharing all of my photos with all of my apps? There's no need for Reddit to know what I look like on my 2,500 photo album, right? And everyone that I know. So in your settings, you're able to really stop sharing, even your microphone, right? Picking up certain things. Our location, if it's not anything super vital, there's no need to share your location with all of these, 64 apps that we have on our phone. And so really vetting yourself, right? And not just clicking, okay, accept everything. Yes, share, right? We have to be a little bit more thoughtful because these are things in our control that we can take back. Cool, next slide. And so there's different ways to do that, right? Whether you have an iPhone, iOS, or whether you have an Android. And so you go to your settings, you open up privacy, you look at your location services. I was sharing my location with every single app almost, besides one, because maybe one day I was feeling a little bit thoughtful until I went back and I double backed, right? And I'm like, Reddit shouldn't really have my location, right? Or some of these news services, right? Because you can click toggles and say, no, I'm actually in Pennsylvania, I'm here. And so that's within your reach. Whether you have an Android, same thing, right? But you select app permission. And so whether it's now or later, everyone is going to go to their settings and look at all of your apps and what you're sharing and what you're not sharing. Yay? All right, cool. Next slide. And so these are different apps. I tried Delete Me, so it removes personal information. Canary, I believe, Maju, you tried Canary.
Yep. So, these are all apps you can use. Like, information about us is readily accessible on the internet very easily. If you just Google your name and address, a lot pops. If you Google your name and phone number, a lot will show up because these data brokers are selling our data. These people finder sites and these other ones, people can see your address, where you've lived in the last 10 years, relatives. Now, some of the information can be off, but it's pretty darn close, right? And the reason why this has become a problem is, how many of you have heard of doxing? Right, and swatting? So doxing and swatting are real world threats, and doxing is like people literally sharing very personal information about you online, but they're not looking that hard for it. It's there. And then the doxing then turns into the swatting because now they know where you live. And this has happened to public officials all over the country, right? Again, many in Michigan, I think it happened to three women leaders in the state within like a week. It's a real thing. Again, these apps, you can get them off the App Store, you can plug in some information, and it'll kind of automate to try to clear some of that stuff about you off. We have some security partners that we work with that can go a little level deeper, but this is just a start, at least, to get you going. And again, it's something you can sit in your living room and do. I did this over the holidays, and I tried my best to sort of take care of myself. It's automated, it's user-friendly, so just take a look at them. They're good options. Give it a shot when you can.
I did Delete Me. I needed to get rid of a whole bunch of tweets before I, X and all of that craziness, right? And so we just want to be mindful that if we do have options, that we understand what they are and that we're using them to best protect ourselves, right? And so like Maju said, we got to put layers between us and different forces that be. Cool? Next slide.
All right, we're going to talk quickly, couple slides on travel. How many of you traveled from out of town to be here? Everybody. Staying in a hotel? Going to take a plane home. Train. All right, so we're doing all the things. So we're just going to talk a little bit about ways to stay safe, things you take for granted. You go to the next one. Thanks, Tim. I'm not going to go through all of them, but we've all been there, right? You have a conversation about work, right? About something you're doing in a hotel lobby. Not a great idea, right? We leave a lot of information about ourselves on our laptops, and we're working in a coffee shop or on the train, right? Or in an airport. Put a little screen protector on your laptop. So the only person who can see it is you and not the person who's looking over your shoulder, right? We're going to talk about ride shares and some tools built into them when you take a Lyft or an Uber. You're staying in a hotel, right? I know a lot of women I work with who travel alone often say, like, they go through a whole process when they check into a hotel room, right? They check everything. They put multiple locks on the door. Some of them travel with these little things. You can go to the next slide. I'll show you. Keep going. Is there another one? Yeah. So these portable doorstop alarms. Some of them put the portable locks in the doors. There's the privacy filters you can use. A lot of folks I know who take walks early morning or at night, they take these personal safety alarms. I know a lot of field organizers and canvassers took them with them when they were working the doors, right? You just pull it and it makes a noise. Is it going to stop everything? No, but it does deter somebody who may be wishing you harm. So these are just some things to think about when you're out and about in the world. You can go to could you go back one, Tim? How many of you use Uber? Lyft? So they both have safety features built into them, right? So you can, there have been incidents of people getting in a vehicle that they thought was their Uber and it wasn't. So there's a PIN you can share with the driver and that the driver has to tell you. Share your trip status. Like my son's about to turn 19. He hates when I tell him, dude, you could just share your trip status. He hates sharing anything with me. It's a whole thing. But this, my wife does it with me all the time, right? Just let me know you got there safe. I know they did. and it's automated, and it's easy. There are tools built into things that we use every single day that we should probably be leveraging. One quick note for all of you who are organizers. One of the things we said is we all have to learn how to be accountable for one another. And there are ways to do it. There are signal chains you can start before everybody hits the door so you know where people are. There are ride share things you can share. There are all kinds of tools we have at our disposal. We just got to start using them and not taking them for granted. And we've got to start empowering people to ask for help, to tell us when they feel unsafe, to tell us when a door or a particular area feels unsafe, and we've got to permission them to say that. And that's part and parcel of like living and working in this time. We can't stop doing the work, as we've said. We've got fights to win, but we've got to do it smart, and we've got to treat people humanely, and we've got to make sure they've got what they need to get this stuff done. Thanks.
How's everyone feeling? A little nervous? I don't know if you heard me. I had 28 on one email, 15 on another, so clearly I've got some work to do. So thank you, first of all. Are we able to share your slide deck?
No, but we'll share some one-pagers that you can share with everyone.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we'll follow up on that for people who do want some of this. I know I want it. I have actually a lot of questions myself. I know some folks in the audience may as well. I'm curious. Oh my gosh, so hard to know where to even begin. Some of that stuff feels, I don't want to say basic, because it's definitely, certainly as someone who's clearly not complying with a lot of it, not that basic, but it feels like stuff we can all do, right? Things we can all, things we have control over. What are the things, not so much that we can't do, because that's not a relevant point, but what are the things that organizations need to do? So much of what you've talked about was personal. What are the things organizations need to do? And are there different things that different kinds of organizations? We have a pretty mixed crowd here, folks from campaigns, from nonprofits, from consulting firms. Is there any advice for organizations in this moment that we need to consider?
Yeah, a few things. And thanks again for letting us do this today. So organizationally, I think when we talk to leaders right now, they have a couple of concerns. Some of them is legal, and maybe Emma can speak to some of that. But right now, what we say is, first and foremost, on all our work emails. What is our document retention policy? Like, are we saving every email we've ever had? Not great. What are all the ways that we communicate with one another on our team? We've got Slack, we got text, we got Signal, we got email, right? What are all of those, and are we using them properly? Are we putting all the right settings on them? So there's all the ways you should just try to like do a little audit of the way you communicate, what you save, what you don't save. Because as Emma would say, if there were litigation or discovery or anything, like if you have it, chances are you might have to turn it over. And so people don't usually figure that out until it's already too late. But what I want to double back on a little bit what we talked about, because a lot of leaders say to us, but can you do your training with our team and really lean into their personal stuff? Because I'm not super confident that I feel like we take our work really, really seriously, and then like we don't necessarily, we take for granted a lot of things in our personal lives. And organizations are worried, one, for their people, but two, bad actors will try to attack the individual to get to the org. So sometimes like we become the weakest link in the chain, right? And the other thing I would just say lastly as an organization is permission conversations about this. If you're a leader of an org, you are a tone setter for culture, not just work culture, but everything that goes with it. And so it's okay if someone wants to say, for example, I got this weird email and it purports to come from you, but it's really not from you, boss. What do we do about that? Or I accidentally clicked a link that I probably shouldn't have clicked. Report, give them the permission to tell you that without retribution so we can solve it. But like create a culture where you're talking about these things. We often say that if your spidey senses are telling you something isn't right, it's probably not. But at least give you the opportunity to say it. And I know I grew up in this space in politics, not feeling always 100% like I could. You know, if I worked in a field office somewhere, we were supposed to keep the door open all the time because that's how we win, right? We got to bring people in, we got to get volunteers. How about a conversation about how we let people in and when we lock the door and when we don't and who's here and who's accountable and all that stuff. But what we tell organizations, whether it comes to cyber, physical, or anything else, is just give people the permission to talk about it and set a tone yourself for what it should look like.
I just want to chime in really quickly to ditto everything you said. When I was at the DNC, one of the things that we did was had all of our volunteers go through a security checklist. It was very painful for a lot of our volunteers, especially some of the volunteers who were not as technologically savvy as some others were. But it goes back to the point of you're only as strong as the person who's got the weakest security. And sometimes that is making sure that your volunteers are prepared. It was a good exercise for them, though. Once they went through it, they really did appreciate the fact that they were more secure. The devices were more secure. They had two-factor authentication. So I really I can't emphasize enough how important that is. And it's not just employees. It is anyone that you are working with who is working with your organization. And also want to put in, just not a plug at all, but just we used Delete Me when I was at the DNC. It is scary how much of your personal information is available. And if you're an organization and you're thinking through how to help your employees, I can just tell you from a personal standpoint, I felt so much safer knowing that the organization was doing that for me. And they do it on a continuous basis. So every month you get a report, and sometimes it's additional action on your part to make sure that you remove the thing or follow up. But the amount of relief that I felt, I can't begin to describe. So thank you, because I think the things that you're saying are really important.
I was just going to add one last thing. I mean, I 100% agree with you on the document retention policy. What I have seen over the last few months is the number one question for my clients right now is how do I legally protect myself? And that is part of the answer, absolutely. If you're a leader in your organization and you haven't had that conversation with your attorney, you should, because for those conversations, I typically run through an audit of several questions, including document retention, insurance, what does general safety look like? So yeah, it's important.
I'm going to keep asking, but I also want to make sure I give space for folks who want to ask questions. So I see at least one in the back there, a couple here. So you go up to them, I'll ask another right now. Couple, again, sort of follow up on the organizations. It feels like to me certainly in the last campaign, that we didn't do enough to coordinate with one another. I think that we're often worried about the firewalls and the coordination issues. And I know there were changes in the coordination rulings, et cetera. But in this moment, what are the things that we can better coordinate? And then what are the warnings, perhaps, of things we should continue to make sure that we don't do?
That's a big question. It is, sorry. So what I would say right now is a lot of firewalls are just down. And so across the board, you can be coordinating with folks who might eventually do independent programming and and also folks on the coordinated side. So candidates, campaigns, those kinds of things. The other thing too is that I think a lot of folks get nervous about their coordination policies when they're in place, or even now, like you're suggesting, because they just don't know the rules. And actually, it's pretty simple most of the time. And there are ways to have conversations with folks, not about elections, not about those specific races, It doesn't mean that you can never talk to your best friend who's on the other side of the wall. And so I think it, again, goes back to making sure you understand the rules so you're not living out of fear. And then, you know, if you inadvertently mess up the rule, like, say something. I've had those conversations, and usually it is okay. But just make sure that you're, you know, thinking and talking to your lawyer about those rules. You want to say anything? You're always on the coordinator.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, just along the lines of what you're saying, now is the time when the walls are down to convene, to have discussions. Again, you know, not talking about specific candidates or strategies, but especially in the voter protection space, there are things that anyone should care about if they care about democracy. You know, there are things that I think as a community we have to think bigger on in terms of how do we prevent those threats to democracy. And it doesn't have anything to do with the candidate. It has absolutely everything to do with our Constitution. And so just want to ditto that, like, now is the time to have those broad-based conversations about things that are not electoral in nature, but are about preserving our democracy and policy.
Can I just add one thing, Amy, to that answer, which is we have to stop reinventing the wheel all the time, right? And we've got to turn into a learning ecosystem too, right? We've got some really smart people who have done things and lived things, and we have to figure out how to share like best practices with each other. Both like, hey, here, I've tried a thing, my team did this, or we're encountering these threats in this state, what are you doing about it? You know, using convenings like this is important. We should do that. But even when we're not here together, we got to figure out how to build community and relationships, because people, the thing that we learned this year was that you could go to a red state, to a blue state, to the north, the south, it doesn't matter. People were facing very common threats, and all of them felt powerless and helpless, and all of them felt like it was only happening to them. And so we've got to figure out a way to build some empathy and community and share best practices. Hey, I did this thing. I'm working with this group. I just used this app. We're working with this vendor. We just sat through this. Whatever it is, we've got to find ways to share and like lean on each other, not just in election seasons, but all the time, but particularly when things are hot and they're moving fast.
Hi, thank you all, first of all, for doing this. This is really helpful. Something that I've been concerned about is what I feel, so while recognizing that safety is personal and people's tolerance levels are very different, I also feel that there's been, over the last couple of years, and then especially recently with the new administration, there's been a lot of kind of like preemptive capitulation. Like, I've seen Pride events get canceled, which I'm just like, they want us back in the closet. That's what they want. Or even with like the attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion, you know, I know for a fact that anyone is free to join a Black student union. This is the National Society of Black Engineers, as long as you're an engineer. Like, all of those groups already by law, right? They don't discriminate on race and gender and those types of things. But I feel like there's this posture of like, oh, like, if we just do this, then they won't hurt us anymore. And it's like, no, they're gonna hurt you more. But like, can you just talk through like kind of how we can just help like our organizations like take a step back before like operating out of fear and saying, oh no, we have to like cancel this or not do this diversity, equity, inclusion initiative, when it's like, we still have the right to do a lot of these things, and I think people are just acting so much out of fear, and it's actually hurting us.
There, I think, are instances where some people really didn't want to do it to begin with, and this is the excuse that they are using to pull back. So that's point number one that I wanted to make. And then some aspects of these, as you mentioned, are, outlined in the law with the government, some of the initiatives. It wasn't just DEI, it was DEIA, accessibility. And we have the ADA, we have protections in the law. So I think some of it is also, knowing that there is a legal piece of this and that there are going to be challenges in court to some of these things. There are going to be stays. They're not going to be able to implement everything right away. I think it goes back to what I said in the earlier panel is staying focused and making sure that we know that we have work that we've got to do and we've got to continue to do that work, especially if we are already organizations that are committed to the DEI and we're already committed to the cause. We've got to continue to do that because that's what they want. They want us to not continue to push forward with our work.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%. I mean, it is just a conversation with your lawyer. I've had a lot of these conversations, especially in the last month, about DEI in particular, and how that could apply, how it doesn't apply, what you can do to mitigate your risk in a way that makes folks more comfortable. I mean, that is really what I would be telling your folks, and that's, if I were their lawyer, that's what I would be saying. Yeah, I mean, it is a lot of fear, and that is the intent to your exact point. And so just being thoughtful about it and being intentional about how you respond is the way that I would roll. So.
I saw a couple questions. Oh, just making sure the mics get there. Okay, go ahead.
Hi. Just a quick question about like Delete Me and the other personal data deletion apps or programs. Are there any that are like, I just saw that like Delete Me is like a subscription. Is there anything that's like a one-time, like low or no cost option?
Yeah, I was using Canary. I don't know if I paid anything off the bat, but I think there was like a fee on the back end if like I wanted continuous monitoring. So some of them will have that. So, you should just go on the App Store, take a look at some of them, and see if they have a one-time cost or they'll do like a very preliminary scrub, and then charge you for like continuous monitoring or to like automate to do it again. Obviously these are all for-profit entities trying to, but like there are some where you can kind of give it a run or some with a fairly low cost relative to the others. But I've talked to people now who've tried almost all the ones we put up there, and like generally speaking, they've all been user-friendly. The interfaces are relatively easy to use. And there's just a lot of stuff about us out there. So we really do urge people to try one. I do want to add one thing to the answer before on the DEI events and stuff. Yes, to doing it, but also to the risk question. If, it's also important that like you plan for that, right? And, whether you're doing it alone or with a team or a group of volunteers, like start thinking about like, where are we doing this? What layers of safety can we add? What layers of security can we add? How public are we making this? And like, are we monitoring those social media accounts for any weird comments or threats? What do we do? Do we have a decision-making sort of tree here if this event starts and something goes sideways? And like who makes decisions about what to do and when to pull it down or when to keep it, and do you call law enforcement and don't you? There's a lot of things. And again, one of the things we talk about a lot on this stuff is have a plan. Like have a plan before you need a plan. You may never need it, but just permission a conversation around it and the who does what, so that when something bad does, if it were to happen, you've got a plan to tackle it. And you're also showing people that you're not just whistling past it. Right? Like, yes, we're making the political statement that we're going to do this, and we should, but we're also going to do what we can to keep you safe here too.
Hi, just real quick. As far as pass keys and automated password generators, how safe are those? Because I shouldn't say this, but there is a place where a lot of my passwords are. So should I delete those, get rid of those, and create, make new ones?
So if it's someplace that's not secure And I urge you to have a password manager and delete all of them and start from scratch. That's my number one instinct, especially if it's not under a coded protection. So sometimes we have them in our notes, and that's okay if that's there, but now we know that we shouldn't have them in our notes. Password manager. I got you.
Hi. You kind of started going into this a little bit, so apologies, but as somebody who works in the abortion access movement and has planned a lot of events and making sure that one of the organizers right here too, everybody's on the same page about, mitigating risk and, ensuring that we have a security point person, all that stuff. Are there any other everything that you named, I did, so I felt pretty validated. But are there any other best practices that you like or maybe people don't know about as much?
Yeah, and thank you for your work, by the way. So yes to assigning roles, right? Who on this team is tasked with security and thinking about security, because someone else might be planning the logistics of the event and dealing with speakers and all kinds of or crowd logistics or other things. Security is really important. What is where are we and what is our relationship to law enforcement? Because the truth is, in some communities it's different, right? And I think sometimes we're all given the blanket, just call the police. It's not necessarily the case for everybody. But if we do, do we have an open line about this? Have we informed somebody that we're doing this? Do we have, who makes that phone call? Again, just playing forward worst case scenarios. Is this venue that we're using, is this public or private? Do we own the space or do we share it? If we're sharing it, who are we sharing it with? Are we controlling access? Is there a sign-in procedure? There's just a bunch of things which I'm sure you're doing and thinking about. But just making sure there's ownership. It's just like any other project. Who owns this element of it and is accountable to make sure it's actually happening. But again, I think the interesting thing is in the abortion access and the choice movement's probably well ahead of the game in our ecosystem because unfortunately you've had to be. But I think what we've tried to do is tell people to just give people ownership over elements of this and keeping it safe. Don't put it on any one person. And also just how you communicate. So do you have a signal chain on the day of the event or some way that the key players are talking? And it's the only thing we talk about is security on this. We don't talk about whether the lights are coming on or anything. Let's do that somewhere else. This is where we talk about someone that's here that may be making people uncomfortable. This is where we talk about someone that's at check-in that isn't on the list and what do we do? This is with someone that might be a threat and what do we do about it? And you can quickly communicate.
A three-part question for Emma, who is not our attorney. Okay, so Emma, I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say 90% of the people in this room do not have an attorney. So first, if you don't have an attorney, where do you go for help? Second, how many pro bono hours has Elias Law dedicated to giving to the movement, since 90% of the people in this room don't have an attorney? And third, realistically, do you think we're going to need to consult attorneys when the attacks against us will be extrajudicial? And before you answer any of those, I recognize that you are not our attorney.
Well, thank you for that. Okay, so sure, great. So first, what was your first one? Let's go one by one. Yeah. Yeah. You'd be surprised. There are folks who do nonprofit or pro bono work, and throughout the firms in DC, and so that is something that you could reach out on. The other thing is that there is a good resource, Boulder Advocacy, which provides a lot of good resource related to tax, lobbying, campaign finance. And then depending on your issue, there are different issue specific, so abortion rights, those kinds of things, GLBT, those things. So the second question was how much... I am not committing my firm to anything. I do not have that power, but thank you for thinking I do. But we do pro bono work depending on, and I'm happy to have conversations with folks initially, and then can help point you in the right direction if I can't help you. And then the last one.
Realistically,
Yeah.
do you anticipate the attacks going through lawful channels? Because I anticipate extrajudicial attacks. It seems like the law is a gentleman's agreement that our side upholds.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll say this. We, in 2020, fought a lot of litigation through the courts related to the election. We also did that in 2024, and our democracy still stands. Trump did everything he could, including sending people to the Capitol to try to stop the certification, and that didn't happen. And so, from my perspective, you can only see what we've seen in the past, or you can only say, based on what we've seen, what will happen. And so from my perspective, we need to stay vigilant. We need to sue, and we need to sue. If anybody wants to sue, just talk to me. I love it. And then we can go from there. I hear you on that threat, but at least right now, that's not where we are.
So I hear you on the other side doesn't love the law, except when they want to weaponize it. So, because I have worked in organizations, and we've seen some organizations recently that have been on the other side of legal attacks. Sometimes those legal attacks start as some right-wing rag writing about an organization's work, and then the state legislature gets a hold of it and starts asking for documents, and then it turns into a lawsuit and discovery requests and all kinds of things. So you'd be surprised, because they'll use the very rough methods too, obviously, like violence and the doxing and the swatting and the harassment and the intimidation, but they will also leverage their lawyers to go after all of it in the name of mucking up our gears and slowing us down and intimidating, but they will. So it's unfortunate. That's the reality we live in. And another org that does a lot of work with C3s and tries to provide pro bono counsel is We the Action, which is a network of lawyers all across the country, started by folks who worked in the Obama White House, and they will try to help C3 organizations with pro bono counsel on a variety of things. So it's another place to think about.
Yeah, Amy, how much time? How many more questions do you think we can take? It's 4:25. Okay, so 2 questions. All right. So can I see hands of folks who want to ask questions? Okay, I'm going to start over here, but we can only do 2. So you're going to have to negotiate amongst yourself via eye contact.
Hi, I've been listening and trying to figure all this out, and my question is, if we're dealing with actors who are, let's say we're just pardoned for an insurrection and, possibly owe someone a favor at the White House, what do you think is and I ask all of you personally, what your feelings are about people in the movement who are active in the movement, possibly, and I never thought I'd ever have to say this, exercising their Second Amendment rights and purchasing personal firearms if necessary.
You just said out loud what a lot of people have privately thought, I think.
So,
that's fair.
Yeah, so I think your question is, generally, do you think you should purchase a gun? Is that what you're saying? Okay. Yeah, sure. So that is, and I am not your lawyer, and I'm not encouraging you to do anything, but I will say, that is a personal decision. So, we have a Second Amendment right, and that's a personal decision. My dad hunted deer throughout my childhood. We have rifles at my childhood home, I don't have a gun. So it's a personal decision.
Anyone else want to comment? Okay. Linda, I was going to say, and I know up over here, he's had his hand up for a long time, so I just wanted to make sure we got up to one of the first hands up in the room, and then one over here, and I know you said two, but I think we're okay. You guys okay? Okay. We can go a couple more minutes over. We started a little late, so.
I flipped it off. Briefly, I just want to mention that I hope if people have to share passwords for any reason on a campaign or firm or whatever, they do that over the phone rather than Google Docs, because I'm really scared of how often I see that. But I wanted to ask a question, which was just, do you have any boilerplate security policies or checklists that go a little further than this that maybe cover a organization or a firm? That would be helpful.
Yeah, thanks for the question. The Google Doc thing just got my blood pressure up because I've seen it. Yes, we've got. We'll share some one-pagers and like some checklists with Amy that and then some of it's your personal, but like something that like everybody should be doing internally, and you should also be looking at your own like work email accounts and all, and making sure that all of those settings are properly being used and leveraged on them as well. The other thing that people are hearing a lot now is like they're getting telephone calls and emails asking for very personal information, claiming to be from a bank, claiming to be from the IRS, claiming to be from wherever. Chances are it's probably a scam. And so just be leery of like sending funds and authorizing the sending of funds based on an email. You never know where that's going. And so that is something common. And again, this is something that happens in organizations all the time. And people don't feel like the permission structure to say, I made a mistake. And so the money's out the door and no one said a word. And a vendor calls one day and says, where's the payment? And the payment's actually gone somewhere else because someone did a really good job spoofing that vendor. So it's also just about educating your team about like being able to raise things that don't feel right. And verifying a lot of things over the phone or a video call or something like that before you start sending money anywhere.
Hi. This slide is both comforting and alarming. What would be considered to rise to the level of political violence or harassment that would be something to call you about, and what would be the experience after making that phone call?
Yeah, so what I would say is, if you are in imminent danger, and again, to the level you are comfortable calling law enforcement, you should call law enforcement. So we tell people all the time. Now, if you are experiencing, you might be a doxing threat. If you're experiencing online harassment, we got calls from candidates who were out knocking doors with their volunteers and consistently being harassed and didn't know what to do or say to their teams or how to handle it. There were people who were consistently seeing a lot of their personal data leaked online, weaponized against them. So those are the calls that we would take and kind of give you tips and tools to try to get through that. But if you are feeling an acute threat, and again, I want to say this, it is subjective. If that acute threat feels really acute to you, it doesn't have to feel acute to me. If it feels acute to you, you should call law enforcement if you're comfortable doing that. But otherwise, you can call us and we can try to either give you some tools ourselves or connect you with a security partner that can help.
One more, and then we'll.
Oh, yep, I see it.
This is more of a generic question for everybody there. So we know about Trump, and we know that he says the enemy within. What do you think about if Trump were to ever try to round up Democrats, round up activists, actually take this country into what World War III was? Or not World War III, World War II, my bad. My bad.
The very honest answer is that anytime you do political work of any kind, there is always a personal risk that is present. I will tell you, like, my family has reached out to me, and some of them have expressed concerns. I don't know how other people feel about this, but I am a person who is just very strongly committed to the work that I'm doing. And personally, I believe that this is a calling on my life. And so I have just had to approach every day of, like, I know, what I'm doing. I am focused on doing the work. It is very hard. It is very easy to get caught up in what ifs and scenarios and hypotheticals. But I don't want that to scare me into getting the work done that I know has to happen. That doesn't mean don't take precautions to be personally safe. I think that is absolutely what we all have to do, and that's why this session is happening right now. But from my own personal perspective, I am here. I am a person of faith, so I feel like I am divinely guided, and I just have to put my faith in that.
And that's spot on. And the other thing we would all say, and the reason why Amy wanted us to be here, and the reason why a lot of us do this work, is because we want you to stay in this. But we don't want to just give you an empty platitude and say stay in this. We want to give you something to work with here, because at the end of the day, all of this is about keeping our talent in the fight. And organizations talk about talent retention all the time. And they talk about, raises and promotions and professional development and all that. Safety and security is part of retaining the talent. I can't tell you the number of candidates we spoke to, especially down ballot candidates, particularly women in very difficult districts, who would go knock on doors or go to an event and get harassed and get in their car and ask themselves, should I drop out? Why am I still doing this? And God bless them, they got up the next day and they knocked on doors again. But we got to give them more than that, right? We owe each other more than that. And so this is going to be a tough 4 years. Let's just say that out loud now, right? The last 3 weeks, it felt like 4 years, right? But it feels like 100 years, right? So we've got to muster the grit and the grace to do the work, but we also have to give each other the tools and the techniques to actually get out there and do it, where we feel a little bit better, we feel a little bit more confident, and that we know that we're investing in our people to go out there and do it, and we're not just putting them out there on a wing and just trying to hope it all works out. And that's what all of this is about.
All right, I think we're going to call it. I'm sure there are more questions, and our panelists may be around for a few minutes. I just wanted to say a personal thank you to all of you for giving up your time talking about pro bono. Everyone has been here pro bono, so extra thanks to all of them, and really to all of you and to all of our other panelists as well. It's been amazing. I will tell you, as someone who has done this work for more years than I like to count, and has also done this work, as I shared with some of you, around the world. I've worked in war zones. I've worked in Iraq. I've worked in Congo. I've worked in Libya. I've worked in South Sudan. I have worked in many places where I've had to wear body armor, where I've had personal security details, and where I've not had any security details. And people are always worried about me, certainly friends and family. But the reality is, I have not felt less safe in those places than I feel here today. And I'm not saying that to scare anyone. It's just it's a reality that, there's dangerous things every day that a lot of it has nothing to do with politics, right? So we live in a society that unfortunately has a lot of dangers. And I just say that for all of us, just to take our own personal security very seriously. Obviously, I'm going to do a lot of work this weekend, I promise all of you. My digital security, Seth, where are you? He's always on my case. He's up there. But this is very serious work, and we all need to continue doing this work. Thank you for saying that, because that's the reality. We're holding this today. We're holding this weekend. We're holding this space. Gain Power exists, and many of these other organizations exist to support you, to keep you doing this work, because we need you desperately to keep doing this work now more than ever. So I just again want to just say thank you. Thank you all for being here. And thank you all. And we're going to have just a little transition as we get to our final wrap-up session here, right? So stand, stretch your legs a little bit, but don't go far because we're going to just have one final. Billy's, oh, you're already ready. Oh.